Hello everyone, I'm Dak, and this is Dak Chats. And tonight was the Veto episode of Big Brother. And what an episode it was. uh, there were a few things that I noticed going into tonight's episode, or watching tonight's episode. And the main takeaway I had for tonight was production really loves to sweep stuff under the rug. No matter how hard they tried to make it look like Paloma actually wasn't going after Taylor on a personal level, they just couldn't escape it. They really tried to hide what's actually been going on, and it's obvious. Not only has there been a lack of them talking about it and speaking about it publicly, which I do take a little bit different stance than most people. A lot of people are always saying they got to tell these house guests to cool it down. From a game perspective, I am kind of a purist. I don't like any type of outside influence whatsoever on the players. And so, unfortunately, even when we're presented with situations like the one we're currently in with this cast, from a game perspective, my love of the game itself, as much as I hate to see what's going on, I don't like to see interference. Now, they could say, sorry, just realized that my lighting was off. So hopefully this looks better. But from a production standpoint, I could see them at least reaching out a little bit and saying, we got to tone down a little bit. There's ways they can go about it, certainly, that wouldn't interfere with the purity of the game. I don't know if that's a word or if I made it up, but there's ways they could go about it that wouldn't disrupt the flow of the game. But when it comes to actual influence, as much as I hate to see everything that's been going on, I don't want them to get involved too much from a game perspective. That being said, that doesn't take away the fact that they could and should make some type of statement, and definitely should be accurately portraying what's been happening in the house on the episode. Now, full disclaimer, the events that have been going on, when it comes to, one of the bigger events that went on was Taylor modeling her finale night dress. I did not see that on the feeds myself. I've heard about it a lot. I haven't actually seen it myself on the feeds, so I'm pretty sure that what we saw tonight was that event. I don't know 100%, but I don't know what other time she would have done that. So I'm going to make the assumption, and you know what they say about assumptions, but I am going to make the assumption that that's what this was. That this is the same event that occurred. So, going off that assumption, they completely dropped the ball entirely. I don't know. Well, obviously they didn't care to carry it to the finish line because they would have shown accurately what happened. All they show was Taylor walk in with a bunch of dresses and decide, I'm going to start trying on all my dresses and put on a fashion show for you guys. And that's not what happened. She was encouraged by the other house guests to do that fashion show. Ultimately, wearing her finale night dress. And once she did that, she was encouraged by the other girls. And once she did that, then they started saying the things that we see in the diary room. So we're going to come back to this, and we should start from the top, but that's just, first thoughts right out of the gate. We're going to try and put some of that stuff aside. Like I said last night, it's a challenge to do that with everything that's been going on, but I do want to try and give the rest of the season an opportunity to breathe and see what it could turn into. I still have high hopes, very low expectations, but semi-high hopes that we can still have a fun summer and enjoy the rest of the season. I was still able to enjoy parts of 19, parts of 21. So I'm hoping that I can still do that this season. So far, I haven't a lot because of everything that's been going on, but once we get past this week, we'll see where that can lead to. So let's backtrack a little bit and let's start from the top of the episode. The first thing that we see is the ending of the nomination ceremony, and we see that Michael goes straight up to Daniel and wants to talk to him and say, "Hey, listen, no bad blood. I'm not upset." And he says, basically tells Daniel, "Hey, I still want to work with you." And they both kind of have a kumbaya, but in the DR, we see Michael saying, "Yeah, I'm telling him all that, but I'm still coming for his head. I'm seeking revenge," which, is to be expected. Daniel does expect that, and we see in his DR, he says kind of the same thing. "Hey, that's great. You can say that, but I know you're still coming for me, and you are my target because you're a super fan like me, and we are dangerous." The smart thing for Daniel to do, in my opinion, would be actually team up with Michael. Knowing he's a super fan, that usually helps a lot, having another one in the house when you are one yourself, being able to partner up with them, because most of the other people don't really know how to play and know what's going on. I mean, they might adapt, they might figure it out as it goes on, but they're not going to have that same level of knowledge of the game that you two will, and that you can use moving forward. And so I don't really see this as a smart move at all, but it's what he wants to do. So, I mean, I understand where he's coming from he is dangerous perspective. He could be, but you could also utilize him. He could be a tool in your back pocket, and he's choosing to forego that option. So, anyway, we see that conversation, and after that, Daniel talks to the other nominee, Terrence, and they start talking about how, Daniel says, "I want to keep Terrence. I like the guy, and I think I can use him as a number moving forward." So that's currently Daniel's plan at the start of the episode, is to see if, try and keep Knobs the same and send Michael out, and hopefully keep Terrence and use Terrence in the future. Ultimately, at this point, Terrence is kind of being, if he were to stay, which he probably is, he's already kind of being talked about as being an easy goat for the next several weeks. He's going to be an easy person to put up because he is a low-level threat, and he's already been nominated. Once you're kind of put in that position early on as a easy nomination, easy pawn, it's kind of hard to get out of that. So, fortunately for Terrence, he probably is going to stick around, but he is not going to be away from the block very often. So we're going to probably see his face on that memory wall a few more times this season. But after that, we move on to the Taylor segment again, like we were talking about. And I thought it was funny how we continued to see little snippets of, and we'll talk about it again here in a minute, but little snippets of people saying, "Hey, Taylor's not that bad," and Joe and Kyle both are loving her fashion show. They're eating every bit of it up and feeding into it, and they have nothing but positive things to say. Whereas Paloma and Jasmine have nothing but negative things to say. I'm really taken aback by some of the stuff Jasmine said and done. Following, it wasn't shown in the episode. It may or may not be later on, but in tomorrow's episode. But Jasmine mentioned something right after the nomination ceremony, or the veto meeting that we'll see later on. And she talks about how, well, I told Taylor, don't bother coming to ask me where my vote is because I'm going to tell you, and you don't want to know the answer. If you want to know the answer, come ask, but you're going to find out the answer. Or it's like, you don't have to be that aggressive. All you have to say is, look, unfortunately, currently, I think my vote's going to be with Terrence. And I don't know that there's anything you can do to change that, unfortunately. You don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to be mean and aggressive. And that is the mentality that a lot of house guests seem to have towards Taylor. And it's sad and it's unfortunate. And we've been singing this tune for a week now, but it's just the reality of the situation. So, we see Jasmine and Paloma talk about how she has no self-awareness by doing this. But, my wife actually made a good point watching this show. She's like, they're cooped up in this house. They got nothing to do. And most of these people are not able to do what they're used to doing outside in the real world. And here's Taylor, and she actually has the ability to do that. She is doing something that she enjoys. And, I could see in a way how it could come across a little cocky and arrogant, but that's what she does. And obviously, it's obvious without even having seen her DR session tonight, where she talks about how, she tends to be more reserved and laid back. She doesn't open up easy. That's obvious just by her behavior. And, so you see someone that's not super confident, or at least doesn't give off confident vibes. And she's enjoying herself, in a way that she's able to have fun and not be super shy. And you're crapping on that, and not only that, but she's finding something to do in this house where there's nothing to do. Of course she's going to do something, she wants to have fun, and who doesn't want to be able to have fun and kind of give their mind a break a little bit from all the chaos of what's going on. And, so it's a shame seeing the way this is edited. We do see a little bit later, beyond that, after the veto ceremony, which we'll talk about, how some flashbacks showing what actually happened, and we'll get back into that here in a minute. But after that segment of her fashion show that she was putting on, we see the veto pick. So for veto, it shows that Daniel picked Indy, or drew Indy, Mike drew Turner, and Terrence drew Amira. And now Mike mentioned that, I call him Mike because it's easier to type in, so he might prefer Michael. I'll probably use either or. But anyway, we noticed Michael saying that, I've gone to everyone in this house and asked if I can choose them, and everyone's basically told me no. So I'm just going to pick the person that I think I can beat in the upcoming challenge. And that's what he does. He picks Turner, which wasn't house guest choice, but he drew Turner, and it worked out for him, because we see later on that Michael actually goes on to win the veto. And, I do want to say I am becoming a fan of Michael. Now, he does, at least at this point, from what I can tell, it kind of looks like he's lacking a little bit of something, and I can't quite put my finger on it because he's a smart guy, he's a super fan, he knows the game in and out, and he also is very, very much aware of his position in the house. He's not stupid. He's not, we see very intelligent people, sometimes exactly like him, very intelligent, know the game really well, and they get in and they have no idea where they're actually at. And he knows exactly where he's at. But there's something missing, and I can't quite put my finger on it. And it might just be the fact that he's lacking a strong enough social game to be able to make moves. And it's still early on. There's a lot of time to develop. So for me, Michael is a person that I am really starting to pay attention to and look at, and I'm excited to see where he can go if he's given the opportunity, because he is going to have to really claw his way up the ladder, so to speak, because he's at the bottom of his current alliance and he knows it. He knows that he was the very last person to be picked, and he was, maybe he might even be aware that he wasn't the first choice. I'm not sure if he is or not, but so he knows he's at the bottom. But they're still utilizing him, and they're still letting him in, and he's in a much better position than he was at the start of this week. So we'll see where he goes and where he can take it, but I'm excited to see his potential and where he leads. Currently, he is my hope for HOH because I think he will put up Turner and Pooch, and I think that would be really entertaining. The rest of the house, I think that it's going to be a pretty dry and basic week if most of the people win. So there are a few different people that would be interesting, but he's who I'm looking at currently. I think that would give us, albeit Taylor surviving this week and winning HOH would be very interesting, more so than anything, but the likelihood of that happening is low. So Michael is who I'm going into tomorrow night hoping to win HOH. But if Taylor survives somehow, we don't know how this backstage twist is going to end up. I do have a theory on that, by the way. I'm going to save that till the end of the video. It's kind of half baked, and I'm still working on it. But we're so close at this point. Who knows? But so yeah, we see that Michael wins the veto and goes and ends up pulling himself off. One thing we observe during the veto competition is Joe and Taylor having fun together, and Paloma, they just pan over her and there are no words spoken, but you can read every emotion on that girl's face. And I really do think it comes down to, and this kind of hit me earlier today too, and I'm sure I'm not the first one that has said this, but I think a lot of this is just coming from pure jealousy, because she sees, I cannot remember where Taylor's from, but someone who won Miss her state. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on what state she's from. But she won her pageant, and you're talking about a beauty queen per se, and Paloma is still very young and very impressionable, and I could easily see, I'm not saying that she is, but I could easily see where she might have come across initially very jealous of Taylor, and I think that could be a lot of what started some of this. But that's only a factor. There's a lot more to it than just that, but it doesn't really matter at this point. None of it's excusable, regardless of the reason, so there's not much reason to speculate why. But it was something that I'm sure I'm not the only one that noticed. I mean, production, they put that clip in there. They showed that to us for a reason, and I think they are kind of thinking something similar. But after the veto ceremony, we do see that Paloma, Jasmine, and Brittany are all talking together, and they mention how the guys are starting to form something bigger, and they're afraid that they're getting too close. And Paloma mentions we need to break them up. So Taylor walks around the corner, and they say, "Oh, we thought you were one of the guys," which she's like, "Oh, do I walk like a guy?" Like, it's kind of rude, but whatever. And I get that what there's, they didn't know who was there, and they were talking about the guys, so they were on edge and like, "Oh crap, we thought you were one of the guys." So I don't think any malice was behind that, but they certainly didn't go out of their way to make her feel like they don't see her as a masculine person, which is a little rude, but what are you gonna do? And so they mention to her. They say, "Hey, the guys, they're starting to form something. It's obvious, and early on, the girls usually all get taken out one by one, and it becomes the guys' show, and we want to split that up." And Taylor says, "I think it's a little early to be drawing lines in the sand, and as far as just on gender sides." I don't necessarily agree with that take. I do think that the idea of, hey, we don't want the guys to just take off and run it, because that is what happens season after season. If they decide early on that they want to try and split the guys up and start forming and draw that line, I don't see a problem with that. I don't think it's too early for them to do that. Now, it is a little early to start making big moves on it, but just starting to formulate a plan for that, I really don't see that big of an issue with that personally. I wouldn't say that it's too early, but that's her opinion, and that's how she wants to play, and that's fine. She's able to do that, but I don't necessarily agree with Taylor's take on that personally. But she does give her opinion, and they don't seem very thrilled with that, but whatever. So Taylor goes to Monty, someone she trusts, and she doesn't say, we need to target Paloma. She just says, hey, she mentioned that, it looks like there is a power alliance, and that with the guys, and that, she kind of wants to split that up. Literally just relaying the message that Paloma had told her. Now, I'll put a bit of an asterisk here. Taylor did get caught going to Monty, okay? She did tell him some of the info that she was told. And you get caught spreading info, it can put you in a bad situation. But it wasn't malicious. It wasn't even in terms of, I think we need to go after Paloma. It was, be aware that this is something that was said. And that was all that was. So, the extent that we see that getting taken to is a little upsetting, because Monty straight up is like unhappy that Taylor brought that to his attention, and he questions it right off the bat, which is fair to question it, but he doesn't even really give Taylor an opportunity to validate what she says. He goes straight to Paloma and basically decides that, hey, I'm going to let her know that Taylor was told this, which, when you think about it, if he went to her, obviously she's not going to say yes. She's not going to say, oh yeah, no, I am scared of you and the other guys, and I'm going to break you up. She's not going to admit to it, but he wasn't. He wanted to validate what he was hoping was true, which actually turned out to not. And Paloma tries to cover her tracks, and Paloma is the only one that even kind of acknowledges the fact that yes, that was said, but she doesn't even really do that. She just keeps reiterating that Taylor tried to tank my game, and so it backfired, and now I'm tanking hers. The one that really bothered me in this specific instance is Jasmine, because we see when Paloma's talking and she just flat out denies it to Monty, that they cut back to that original conversation that we just saw. And she says that, no, I never said that, I never said that. Cuts back, proves that to be wrong. Jasmine was also a part of that conversation. And when we hear from Jasmine, she just straight up is like, that's a lie. That was never said. No one ever said anything about splitting them up, which is not true. But, we've seen this in past seasons where house guests will literally convince themselves of this. They'll literally convince themselves that they did not say the thing that they did indeed say. It's not the first time we've seen it, and certainly won't be the last. But again, these house guests are backing up the narrative that they desperately want to be true. So even if it doesn't make sense to go to Paloma and tell her, hey, someone told me that you're coming after me, he's still going to do that, because the person that's telling him that, he doesn't want to believe her. He wants to believe that he's safe with Paloma because he likes Paloma more than Taylor. A good player would have taken that, and you can address it with the individual, but just doing it flat out bluntly like that, that's not going to get you actual answers. So we see that come to a head. So as Paloma goes around talking to everyone, we first see Amira, and what we're really noticing is that you start to see these house guests are starting to question this a lot. Amira doesn't really question it. All she says is, she makes a remark like, man, I really hope this is true. Or she says that, I hope Paloma's not lying, or something like that. So you can tell that she's not buying into it. And then Nicole just goes straight down to it and basically says, I don't really believe this, but the house does, and I have to go with the house. Now, I'm going to say something very unpopular here. You don't go to the Big Brother house to be a bad person. You don't. You go to win money. And you win that money by any means necessary, in my opinion. And that can be, for me, I would draw the line at physical violence. There's no room for that, obviously. But any social tactics, for me, are game. Now, whether or not those are good, whether or not you should do that, is a different story. I don't think you should. I don't think that the way they've been treating her is okay. I don't think that they should be doing it. But from a game sense, I believe they have the free will to be as hateful and as rude and vile as they want to be. So unfortunately, that is the game that you're signing up for. And the only other thing to say about that is, maybe we should try casting actual fans who know that, instead of recruits that don't really comprehend that. Because Taylor's not the only one, and year after year after year, we see people that get into this position. And so, if we actually were casting people that, one, knew that anything can be used against them, whether it is morally good or evil, and that most likely it will be, and two, that if you get people that are watching the show, they've seen past seasons and they've seen this stuff go on, and they try and prevent it from happening. They also are aware that America watches everything. And while most house guests are expected to be on TMZ when this type of stuff happens, well, now we got even bigger outlets like the Today Show that's putting out stuff for it. So it doesn't matter what you say, it's going to be out there. And you can tell that to these house guests all you want, these recruits. But they're not going to understand. They're not going to comprehend that the way a fan will that's seen not only malicious stuff on the feeds and on the episode, but also understands the backlash that can come with that. And this is going to end up most likely, especially if it continues throughout the rest of the season, people are going to come out and they're not going to have a job. And, we've seen that time after time each season. So it just comes down to the fact that production really doesn't care about the fans, and they don't care about the house guests and, what the quality of content they're putting on. At least the people that are in charge in production. I think it's time that we see a facelift, because we've had the same crew for many, 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 many years, and we haven't seen any changes. And I think by this point, it's time that we see some changes. I want this game to be restored to what it could be and what it has been. And unfortunately, I'm genuinely scared that we just might not see this show anymore. If this type of stuff continues to happen, it can be boycott and it can get canceled. This show is not beyond cancellation. I mean, just look at, in 2020, when anyone that was a fan of Live PD, look how big that show was, how much that show generated for A&E. I would argue, without seeing any statistics, any numbers, that Live PD brought in the most money for A&E than any other show. And they canned it because of the backlash that they got for it. Surrounding all the stuff that was going on in 2020. So, no show is beyond reproof. No production is beyond reproof. And if it continues to spiral out of control, and it's bringing not only TMZ level, but now other mainstream medias like NBC's Today Show is, addressing it, then anything can happen. And I'm kind of scared to face that reality, because I think if things don't change quick, that is probably the direction we're going in. And it sucks. I grew up watching this game. I don't want to see it crumble because of petty stuff like this, but who knows? All we can do is hope that eventually the baton gets passed before the baton's ripped out of Grodner's hand and thrown in the dumpster. And that they can try and regain some type of dignity for the show. That's the goal. So I think that's going to wrap it up for our review tonight of the Veto episode. I did say that I have a backstage pass theory. Now, this has... I don't want to give feed spoilers away. I will say that one house guest has been talking about this, especially today, and that I picked up on, and it kind of helped me develop my theory. Basically, if you don't take into consideration what Julie said of we've never done something like this, because that claim has been made before on this show, and turns out, yes, you have done something just like this, and it was just painted over a different color. But Now, I have not seen the exact door they're talking about, but the house guests keep talking about this door that won't open, that they can't get to open. I don't know which one it is. Now, if I had to guess off the top of my head, I would guess that it's the door that led to All Stars. I'm blanking on the name, but the extra area that they had set aside for competitions. The same thing for last season too. They used that same area. So I don't know if that's the door they're talking about, but they keep talking about one that they can't get into. And when Julie says, just because you're evicted doesn't mean you're gone, I think there's a good chance that we're going to see something similar to Camp BB, where the house guests are voted out, and then they stay in the house, and then they're forced to live with the house guests until however they choose to resolve that by some battle back. I don't know. I'm hoping that's not the case, because but it makes sense backstage if they lived in a private room. Now, I'm hoping that if they do something like that, they're not actually commingling with the house guests. I hope that they would just, the way the house guests see it, they're voted out and they leave. And so now they're kind of left with, well, what the heck is this backstage thing? Like, we didn't see, like, nothing abnormal happened. But that's just because they didn't see it. So if they do that, I'm hoping that the evicted house guests are left together, but in that room isolated from the rest of the house, because the last thing that Taylor needs is to be voted out and then stuck in that house for at least another 3 weeks while 3 other people get voted out to all fight back, while having to deal with more backlash. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. So, we got one more night, less than 24 hours from now, so we're going to find out real soon, how that backstage pass, how that twist is going to affect tomorrow's eviction and any possible future ones. And it's going to be a fresh new week. So I'm ready to go. I'm ready to move on and see where this leads. And hopefully, we can talk about something else. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen coming up? Because, honestly, I really don't have any idea. I have no clue how the rest of this season is going to pan out. But cross my fingers. I'm hopeful. That's all I can be. That's all I can be is hopeful and just optimistic. That's the word. I kept saying pessimistic, but that's not it. That's the opposite. Optimistic. I'm just trying to be optimistic and see where we can go from here, and hope that it can become positive in the rest of the season. Stay positive, because I do think it's got potential. I think we got a lot of good players that have potential. It's just a matter of getting past a lot of this hate. And there are some players in here that I do think are genuinely good people, and I think that they're just caught up in, a bad spot, because no one wants to risk their game for someone else. And it's true. I mean, you're up against, you're fighting for $750,000. So, we can sit here and criticize them for not speaking up, but I don't know that I wouldn't feel the same way if I was in that position. It's hard to say because you don't know. So we're going to see how this unfolds, and I'm excited and also scared for tomorrow. But we'll see how it unfolds, and if it does kind of go the way that we're all kind of scared that it might, it'll be kind of fun to watch Julie try and make a lemon pound cake out of those lemons. Not just lemonade. There's no lemonade, but we might be able to make a lemon pound cake. Who knows? So, anyway, guys, we're gonna leave it there for tonight. We'll see you guys tomorrow. after eviction, and yeah, we'll go from there. Have a great night.